And welcome back. We are about to venture off into our first segment for this morning. Our first order of duty, of course, very heavy for the fact that we've got lots to talk about. In with us is Dr. Leopold Perriott, who is the Director General, Statistical Institute of Belize, Cassandra Rogers, IDB Country Representative, and Carlos Paul, who is the Senior Economist, Policy and Planning Unit at the Ministry of
Economic Development.
Guys, good morning. Like I mentioned, a lot to talk about this morning. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning.
So let's jump into our conversation for today. You have recently concluded a workshop looking at being able to enhance the flow of statistics, input and output, within Belize. And I want to start off, let's just get an overview of the work of the Statistical Institute of Belize, and then we'll talk about how this workshop will be able to benefit.
Okay, I'll weigh in on this one.
Yes.
The Statistical Institute of Belize is a product was formed in 2007. It's basically came from the Central Statistical Office, which was a government department, Ministry of Finance, and so it was thought that perhaps we could enhance the capabilities by putting it into this new structure, and so we are formed into the SIB, the Statistical Institute of Belize. We are supposed to, according to our act, supposed to be coordinating statistics on a national level, and that's the idea, and that's the idea behind the workshop. As a matter of fact, one of the reasons we had the workshop, we're in the process of creating a vibrant national statistics system, and this system is geared to coordinate and facilitate the flow of official statistics between ministries, between the SIB, international agencies, between the SIB and businesses, non-government organizations. That's the idea, to facilitate, to systematize, to coordinate the flow of official statistics between the various agencies in the country, both nationally, internationally, regionally.
Yeah.
Okay? And so the idea then is that we, in order to put such a system together, we need to do all kinds of bizarre things, and one of them, of course, was this workshop. And the workshop basically was intended to create a list of indicators that everybody can access and can use for policy making, for measurement and evaluation, for information, just curiosity if you so desire. I don't know who that, but that's a
For those who love
possibility, yes. We create this list of developmental indicators for measurement and evaluation. I think probably somebody will speak about that a bit later on. So the workshop, and this is the second of its kind, is supposed to put together this list of developmental indicators. And that was the purpose of the workshop. Basically, that's what it was.
Now,
so here we are.
Let's jump into the IDB's involvement. Obviously, as a development bank, you rely on the information that comes out of the Statistical Institute of Belize. Shifting to a better coordinated system for input and also having identified developmental indicators. How important was it for the IDB?
This is an extremely important activity for the bank because, as you know, the bank has supported the government's efforts to reduce poverty and cause the economy to grow over the last 25 years. In fact, 2017 is the Belize's 25th year in the IDB, and we will be celebrating it, and we could probably chat about that at another time. But since our objective is really to support the government in reducing poverty and increasing economic growth and development, the issue of data is a core aspect of any development paradigm, no? And so in 2014, the bank conducted a study on improving the statistical capacity in Belize. And this study identified several shortcomings related to data quality, access to data, coordination mechanisms in particular. And as a result of that, we had discussions with Dr. Perriott, and I have to say that the bank has been very grateful for the really determined leadership on the part of Dr. Perriott in this particular context. And so we provided a grant to assist the SIB in strengthening the capacity of the national statistical system.
Now, I appreciate Carlos being here, because one of the things that we know and has been identified as a challenge previously for the SIB is that the information that you collate is really, it is provided by the individual ministries. So Carlos, let's talk about what changes within the individual ministries given this more coordinated system.
Yeah, well, thanks again and morning. Thank you for raising that very good question. The Ministry of Economic Development, our mandate is the macro level development planning. So we are the Ministry of Coordinating. So we are responsible to work along with all ministries in making sure that we have effective planning and that projects are being implemented, and we're being able to track and monitor our progress. So we have been doing this work in collaboration with most of the ministry, but more closely with the specific national statistical system and the growth and sustainable development strategy with the Ministry of Fisheries, Forestry, the Environment and Sustainable Development. The close collaboration is because that ministry has the lead responsibility for the international reporting of the developmental goals, which is known as Sustainable Development Goals. So our ministry, even though small, we have been trying to do as much as possible to be able to coordinate with all the policy and planning units for the different ministries to assist us in carrying on this heavy task that we have in the future.
Now, ideally, the data provided by the SIB is to guide what is called evidence-based policy and programs. In other words, you want to ensure that the numbers you're seeing are worthwhile to invest in, to ensure that the programs will be targeting people who are in most need. Now, I want to look at some of the challenges that you are hoping this new national system will help to overcome, especially when it comes to evidence-based planning.
Okay, well, the issue with that is that we observe that people basically work in isolation. We have ministries working in isolation. Basically, it's what it is. Okay? And this presents a problem because we have to make sure in the coordination process that we're working on the same definitions. We're working on the same concepts. We have the same good statistical practices we're observing. And this is a matter of coordination. And the issue of capacity with respect to technical capacity, people knowing how to conduct a survey in the same unified, the same coordinated fashion. These are serious issues. You know, and as a consultant mentioned yesterday, even the issue of reporting the dates. Do you report the month, the day, the year? Do you report how do you report it? You know, there has to be a coordinating activity to do this, and this trickles down into all areas.
So how do we get this? How do we get this together? If it's an issue that we are not working along together, there, how do we get this together?
Well, these are where some of these workshops come in. Okay, okay. And as a matter of fact, this workshop was very good in that not only did it address the issues of a list of indicators, but also people got to see each other and begin the talk of how they would go about what they do, what they offer, how they do things. And this is the first initial step. And there has to be a one-on-one, bipartisan kinds of discussions and agreements, because we have to have agreements between us and the particular ministry in the passing of information. How do you pass information? You know,
that's something that I want to jump in. Sharing of information. We think individually, we are working in silos. We are not sharing because we think that my information is valuable just to me and not to everybody else. So that issue came out at the workshop, and we discussed, we try to find ways how we would be able to build so that we'll be able to share with everybody, because I mean, information is power, we know it. Of course. But we have to share it so that it has more power with everybody else and not just an individual entity agency.
And I think that this issue of data sharing and the availability of data and the concept of silos in terms of who has the data and who owns the data is something that is not unique to Belize. I mean, we have found in the bank that this is something that is very typical of many of our countries, and it is changing, and this is why the bank is so pleased to be part of this partnership. Because in reality, if you choose, you collect data, two agencies collect data, they are collecting it in different ways, there is no harmonization in the manner in which it is collected, analyzed, then it really does not become, it's not being put to its most effective use in terms of the benefit to the country, no?
Absolutely. Now, let me take a moment to look at the development indicators that you're speaking about. And very clearly, are we looking at harmonizing perhaps the language and the way the data is collected? Or are we also looking at introducing new data that will be inputted or gathered?
The answer to that is yes.
Both. Both.
Yes.
So where are some of the new areas that we'll be looking to gather data?
Well, some of the data, for example, let's give you an example, the worst forms of child abuse. Okay, we don't have too much of that at all. In fact, it's zero. Okay. Now, this is a very difficult area. Yeah. And people, I don't think anybody has even tried to gather in a systematic fashion information. And it's something that people would admit is a useful kind of information for people to have.
Yeah.
Okay, so there are these various areas. But also we have to notice that collecting data can be very expensive. Okay. Can be very, very expensive. And so it's difficult sometimes to obtain the indicator you really want because it costs too much. Okay, and so there has to be some kind of a coordination, some kind of mechanism to avoid duplication to start off with, and to assist in collecting this data. And that's a serious pressing issue.
Now, currently you do work along with other agencies to collect data. The mix, for example, with UNICEF is done in partnership with SIB.
Yeah, the mix is funded basically by the UNICEF. Yeah. And SIB was the executing agency, and that provides a lot of the indicators for the SDGs, things of that sort. Yeah. And we do work along with ministries, and it's becoming more and more frequent. For example, we routinely now try to attach a module, so a ministry might be interested in environment, and but they can't do an entire environment survey, but they can attach a small module for a reasonable cost, I might add, to a labor force survey, and so they can get useful information out of this. And I think this is one way to go. So you don't have to come up with a whole survey by yourself. Attach a module and put a few modules together and create a survey that can be useful to a lot of people.
We keep touching on data. Data sharing is extremely important. The workshop was held, and to better understand, we're actually a part of this workshop.
Okay, well, we had a wide variety of government ministries. And there were a few exceptions, but there were a wide variety, okay? And there was a wide variety of non-government organizations there also. And I think there were some business people there. There was the chamber and a few business organizations. And then, of course, international agencies were there. And these are all people who have a vested interest, basically, in this information, this data.
And I have to say that this is the second workshop.
This is the second workshop.
This is the second workshop, and as we said in our opening remarks, we are really very pleased with the level of commitment and interest and the sustained interest that we have seen in this initiative. The fact that there was such a wide range of stakeholders from government agencies, the private sector, etc., really augurs well, we think, for the progress in the national statistical system and strengthening its capacity.
Now, there are many expectations about the data that would be produced by SIB, and I can identify three I know that are important. That it's timely, that it's reliable, and that it's accessible. And we know we've seen that the SIB holds its quarterly press conferences to be able to share some of the indicators that you do collect. But I want to talk about reliability. Specifically because the information is fed through government ministries. A lot of times people question who does the checks and balances, the monitoring to ensure that the numbers are correct, and perhaps not just relying on good faith that this data that is being provided, that is then presented to the public, is in any way inaccurate.
Yeah, well, that's always an issue, and it's an issue we have to face on, okay? And there are several areas from which this can be addressed. Yeah. First of all, I always tell people that a statistician is a statistician in SIB, is the same qualification should be in any place else, okay? We do have a codified set of good statistical practices that all statisticians should follow. Yeah. And this isn't there by chance. This is there because this is honed out by hard practice throughout the world, okay? And if people follow these particular codes, then their errors have been shown to be much smaller. But the idea is, how do you get people to do that uniformly across? And that's where the system comes in, okay? Now, as far as SIB goes, we're in the process of evaluating each and every formula we use, literally each and every formula we use to produce statistics. And that's in the process. And we have very good assistance from Statistics Canada. They have some very powerful people who assist us from time to time. CARTAC is particularly incisive in the evaluation of what we do. And it makes us sit up and take a look. And so the idea is to evaluate each and every process, document it properly, so that we, and not by us, by some external agency, and so that we certify that this is in case, these things are in case, valid the way we do things, and the errors are as small as possible. Okay, and so that's the idea. It's on several points of view we have to attack this issue. This isn't an easy issue.
Cassandra, obviously keeping international standards in collecting data is important as well, because what we may use to measure literacy rate in Belize may be different from the international standards. Therefore, when the information is presented, and perhaps I work with a development agency and I want to get some funding, it seems that Belize is doing pretty well, but not necessarily by international standards. So how important, or where are we in terms of being able to maintain uniformity with what the rest of the world, or how the rest of the world collects its data?
Well, I suppose Dr. Perriott might be able to answer that more specifically, but I would say that this is the exact reason why we are supporting this initiative and think it is so important. Because I can give you concrete examples. And in the case of Belize, I remember the bank has produced a significant volume on what we call social pulse, looking at the social indicators in Latin America and the Caribbean. And there is very little data for Belize in that volume because of the problem that it is not necessarily that the data is not there, but because it is not standardized, it is difficult to compare with other countries. So the issue of standardization and harmonization is really, really critical if it is to inform the bank's policies, you know, in a constructive manner.
And this is precisely correct, and that standardization has to happen. We are signatories to various treaties that have that bind us to various standards, and we need to then make sure we know what those standards are and have them implemented throughout the system.
Are we seeing the
No, just to add on standardization, and I think Dr. Perriott just mentioned it. We have signed various treaties, and the treaty that we had just recently signed in 2014 that came into effect for 15 years is the Sustainable Development Goals, which has a number of targets and indicators. So we have a commitment to report to our national counterparts as well as international. So in order for us to show a better picture of where Belize is doing at the national and regional level, actually up to international, we have to be able to standardize. Our indicators have to be in par with what the Caribbean is reporting as well. So we are working with CARICOM on that, and we are working with the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean to try to standardize the statistics.
In terms of data collecting, are we seeing the progress that we have always wanted working for us right now? And where do we find ourselves always at the buck, whereby we're not able to pass this hump? Is there any such thing? And are we seeing any progress in data collecting, or the progress we were always looking for?
I think we have a substantial capacity for collecting data. I think every time we move around, we collect data. It's just a matter of coordinating this. And so the coordinator will give us all one stream together. while right now we're kind of hodgepodge, if you know. Okay, so the issue isn't that we don't collect data. We collect data like crazy, but it's the issue of coordinating the collection. That is the problem.
And our GSDS, the Growth and Sustainable Development Strategy, did identify that as a challenge because the data disaggregation, collection, accuracy, timely. So what the document recommends for a comprehensive national system, and that's what we are working towards. The NSS is part of what has been recommended.
One of the things I've seen is where a lot of the data that is presented through SIB is more hard data versus what I think a lot of people, the questions that a lot of people ask are looking at some of what I would call the softer data, the kind of CAP studies that we know takes place with smaller NGOs when you're talking about the knowledge that people have on issues, the attitudes, the perceptions. How much of that information, which may come from non-governmental organizations, is currently being fed into the system, and what's the effort to be able to have a coordinated system? I mean, is this an integral part of what you're doing with this national system?
Yeah, well, as you say, we're hardcore.
your numbers, direct numbers, yeah.
Yeah, we're an executing agency this time, and because we have capacity constraints, we don't have the capacity to do some of the soft things that you talk about, okay? And those, of course, are necessary. We hope from time to time that we can get assistance from maybe universities, from people who can address some of these analyses kinds of issues, no? And that's the idea. But in order to do that, the data has to be reliable and it has to be accessible. Okay, and this is the issue sometimes we have.
Now, what is your definition of accessible?
Accessible, of course, raw data from out of SIB has to be anonymized, okay? We have to strip it of all identifying, we're not allowed to identify persons or businesses, okay? But other than that, we have facilities that somebody can come into SIB if you want. If you wanted to investigate some kind of topic, you can come in and we can say, you're in fact a bona fide type person, and so what database would you like to look at? And you identify it, we give you a computer package, we give you a computer, you sit on the side and you do your work. And when you're finished, you're not allowed to take the data with you, but you can take your work with you. Okay.
Now, because accessibility, and I asked specifically for your version, also includes the way people can be able to interpret the data and how it's presented. And as I pointed out, you do have your quarterly press conference. However, I don't know how much of the public is able to truly understand some of the data as it is presented. We have some great infographics up, which is a great way to showcase information.
There you go.
So progress, we see progress there. But is that also something that we're working towards, that data goes beyond just raw numbers? And I'm not talking analysis yet, but just that it moves beyond the raw numbers into more comprehensible, in a more comprehensible manner for the wider public.
I think it's really important. I mean, data is information for the people. It's not necessarily for an individual government agency. It is really data for the people. And I suppose one of the challenges that many countries have is that the data is not necessarily in a form that is easily understood by, let's say, the average person on the street. And so we have to develop mechanisms and techniques, approaches, strategies that will filter that data down, disseminate the data, and in a manner that is highly non-technical, so that the average man on the street can actually understand and use that data, you know, accordingly.
Or even understand where we fit in society. Now let's move to the analysis portion. And I think this is where we have spoken before with SIB that obviously your role is to be able to produce the data. We don't have as much analysis as, or perhaps it takes place and it's not necessarily shared with the public, that we expect to have, to look at trends, to look at some of the contributing reasons why some of the numbers stay the same or change. What is your effort in terms of being able to push the entities who can do analysis to take the data and use it?
This is all, I can win a little bit on this one. We do very, very little analysis at SIB. Straight up, we don't. Yeah. And this for obvious reasons. We don't have the capacity to do that. The idea is to, I think our best bet is to project ourselves as being data producers, and we have data available for people that people can use. And we've had requests from the University of West Indies. They're regularly requesting data for their own students to do their various theses and research that they do in UB. We would like the same thing to happen in Belize with the University of Belize, with Galen, whosoever would want to do some kind of research. And that's our best bet at this time. I know Central Bank does some forecasting. We don't do forecasting. They do forecasting. They use the information to do forecasting. As a matter of fact, it isn't. Once you produce data, you want an independent pair of eyes to look at the data, do the forecasting, and what have you. That's the idea. But it is an area that we're particularly weak. The analysis area. We have started a small one-person research department.
A one-person research. It's a start. Yeah.
I just want to add in and concur with what Dr. Perriott had mentioned, that we at the government side, we are looking for the universities, and you're right, the 2 universities we have, to be able to have a research department, to be able to do more analysis. We at the policy and planning unit, we try to do some analysis as best as possible, but due to capacity of our numbers and our skills, we are unable to do more. But we do use quite a number of data along with IDB and other funding agencies, hence the reason why we have so much investment projects. All those projects that we have in country been implemented, we have been relied on data. Data has indicated to us that, okay, this is where our chart is there, this is where we have to make our investment. So this is where how projects have come in the education sector, the health sector, infrastructure sector, and the list can continue.
How are we engaged?
Sorry. Yes, just to add to what Carlos is saying, certainly on our side of the IDB, we appreciate the critical role of the SIB in consolidating the data, etc. But the analysis of data is very critical for us. This is the basis on which we identify what we consider, based on dialogue with the government, to be the priority areas that the bank is going to support the country in over the period of what we call a country strategy, which is a document that really identifies what are the goals and expected results of the areas of support over a 4 or 5 year period. So it's really critical in terms of the analysis of data itself. And also, I also wanted to add that as part of this project, the SIB will also be working with the University of Belize to develop a curriculum in statistics and statistical analysis, because of course the sustainability of this initiative is really important.
You know, that would have been my next question, because it is important, like you mentioned, to collect data. Data collection is very important, and everybody should be engaged so we could eventually keep on track. And I wanted to know, in terms of engaging the educational institutions, what is being done to engage these folks in terms of collecting data, and I say this from the standpoint that eventually these folks will get out of school and then eventually become data collectors, and so just to be on par, now these folks must be engaged. So what is being done to engage these folks?
Okay, with the good assistance from one of our best, best supporters here from the IDB. We have instituted we have a consultancy going right now that deals precisely with what you're talking about. How do you build capacity to train people? And basically it goes in 2 directions. One is to look at the programs at UB universities to kind of get in the issues that SIB and statistics would really need. Right now, for example, there's a math program, but it's a hardcore pure mathematics program, and so, but we need to get some stuff for national accounts in there, some stuff on economics, that's the kind of thing we need to put in those programs to make them useful, that when somebody comes from UB to SIB, you know, they're off the ground running at the moment they get in the door. We don't have to do a whole heap of training up front, okay? And then there's the other aspect of in-service training. Train to develop modules, compact modules that can be delivered to the entire system, national security system, to all the ministries that might be interested in SPSS, for example, and so we can have a module that deals with that particular topic, or they might be interested in sample surveys, and so a module that deals with that, and so it's in-service training. Okay, and so in this way we can begin to standardize what we in fact know and how we approach this whole issue of data collection.
Now, looking at this is your second workshop, and you've obviously had extensive dialogue with government departments and also, as you pointed out, private sector and other entities. Where do you find, I mean, how far are we in terms of establishing the type of harmonization that you're talking about for the national statistics system? Are there some departments or government departments that perhaps are a bit further behind, that you'll have to put some more effort in being able to get them up to speed?
That's an interesting one. There are some low-lying fruits that I think it behooves us to address those ministries, those departments, those organizations that are very well developed, because we want to establish some successes. We need to have a few pilot projects to give us some encouragement, right, by being successful, okay? And so there's some departments that are very well organized, and so then it might behooves us to link up with those and implement the project with those. And so we can go and say, see, there we are, we're doing fantastic in these things, and so why don't you join? Okay? And so the idea then is an incremental implementation.
So you're going to work department by department to be able to get everybody
that would be
up to speed.
my suggestion to do, to pick the ones that are easy to do, that are, you know, that talk the same language as us, are basically almost there. You don't have much, and then organize it and have a nice big success. Come on your show and talk a little bit and pat ourselves on the back and all kinds of things like that. And proceed in this fashion.
Then you'll come with the universities and talk about the analysis that's happening.
That's right. And in this way, you keep people's interest, you keep the momentum going, you show some success that in fact this thing can in fact work. We're not really just talking and talking, it can in fact work, and away we go.
Because I think the strategy that Dr. Perriott just articulated there makes really good sense, because we often forget that this is not quick. It's not something that takes a short period of time. It is a process. It will take quite a while before the national statistical system, this I'm speaking from the experience in other countries. And so the approach of using low-hanging fruit, doing pilot studies, etc., making sure that the system works, and then expanding it to other ministries, agencies, as the case may be.
How important, I'd imagine buy-in to this is so important, because change in general can be hard. And when you're making institutional changes like this, perhaps a statistician is used to gathering data in one way for a very long time, and you're flipping the script on them at this point. What is the buy-in to ensure that the old habits won't creep back in?
That's a particularly difficult topic, the management of change, and it can be very stressful for a lot of people, including people who try to do it. There has to be buy-in, not only at the lower level. There has to be buy-in at the top, and that's where the difficult really can be very difficult sometimes. And what was nice about this workshop was that that process is underway. Okay. People are buying in, but we need to be addressing the CEOs. We need to be addressing the ministers on this particular issue, and they have to appreciate the utility. This is dollars and cents. Basically, it's dollars and cents you're talking about. To coordinate, you're talking about dollars and cents, and this is where the emphasis has to be pointed. That this thing makes economic sense to be coordinated in this fashion. We reduce duplication, we reduce waste, we improve our access to information, we can do better in policy monitoring, in policy crafting. It makes economic sense. And that's what they have to do.
Just to add a little on the buy-in, I think the numbers speak for itself. This is the second workshop, and we see the level of participants. We had I think to some instances, 5 representatives from a ministry. So that indicates the buy-in from the chief executive officer giving permission authority to officers to come with us. This is the second workshop for the SIB in the National Statistical System. But this is not the second workshop for our process that we are doing, which is a growth and sustainable development strategy, which is in line with what we are doing. We are developing an M&E framework that will assist us for monitoring progress of how we are doing in developmental aspect, and that will assist with the national statistical system. So for us, in the GSDS process, we have been getting the buy-in from the top level. This document was endorsed by Cabinet in 2015. We have had series of consultations at different heads of department level and at the CEO as well. And we are planning to go back. I was talking to Dr. Rogers a while ago. The Ministry of Economic Development is planning to go back to the CEOs to keep the momentum, to keep the discussion of this document, of the statistics that we need to collect, so that we be able to monitor, so that we know nationally how we are doing, how we are moving, if we are moving, if not, and to report internationally as well.
Yeah. And I'm thinking of one specific example. The Ministry of Health, for example, has the exceptional BHIS, Belize Health Information System, really ahead of its time when it got started. And we know one of the identified challenges is that the private institutions aren't mandated to be able to input information, some information, into the system, which to me, as a non-numbers person, means that there's an identified gap in the information as it's being presented. Now, I know that's not SIB's, you don't have the mandate to be able to change it, but these are some of the areas where there has to be some legislative changes to ensure that the data will come from all corners and ensure that the overall picture that is painted of Belize is as accurate as possible. How do you get to that phase?
Well, I think I think there has to be a reevaluation of some of the laws and the legal issues.
Yeah.
Okay, but I think that is all fine and good. But I think basically we need to get people's willing cooperation.
Yeah.
Okay. It's a much better deal to have somebody who's willing than to have somebody who's you're dragging along by the heels to do this stuff. Okay, and that's where we need to have bipartisan conversations, and maybe establish MOUs to clearly define what is being passed, how, and how things are supposed to be operating. Yeah. Okay, and I think it's a much more civilized way if you will, of doing things. And,
so tell them more why you should do it instead of why you have to do it.
They have to do it. Because right now, for example, our act gives us the authority to say you will give us this information. But this might be counterproductive. Okay. You know, it's a much better deal to come and say, all right, open your eyes. Let's see how we can organize this thing. You want this and I want this, and so we can horse trade or whatever the case is. Okay, it's a much, to my mind, it's a much better way to proceed than to. The laws are there in case you get somebody really intransigent, and you exhaust all avenues of cooperation, and then maybe you might want to use a stake of some sort.
So let's close off with I think what is the most important question to be answered. How will this system improve the lives of everyday Belizeans?
Yeah, that is a good one. That's the bottom line, isn't it?
Yeah, that's what
the bottom line. That's the bottom line,
yeah.
Isn't it? Okay. We need to have a health system that's responsive to people. We need to have social structures that address things like poverty. We need to know where the people have serious problems. We need to know where we have issues with our education. We need to know where we have issues with security. You know, hurricanes. How do you handle things? We need to know how to do that in a most efficient fashion. These are people issues. These are people issues. Straight up forward, these are people issues. And so if you're extremely disorganized and things are a little bit of a mess up top, you know, it's very unlikely that you're going to be particularly organized at the people level. It will be an anomaly in the universe, I suppose, that to happen. And so we have to get ourselves organized at the top to make sure that things are working, things are flowing properly, and so we can have useful systems for the people.
From the bank side, I would respond by saying the issue of collecting, analyzing, and disseminating data is really critical for the country of Belize because it has to inform the growth and sustainable development strategy. This is the country's strategy for reducing poverty and increasing economic development. And therefore, this is a direct link with improving the lives of all Belizeans.
A good strategy, a good plan without a robust M&E indicator framework is not a good plan. For us to have effective planning, we need to have a robust M&E indicator that will guide us for the achievements of the targets and indicators to have economic growth, achieve poverty, improve access to quality education, to quality healthcare, and improve infrastructure and all those things. So we need to have a robust M&E indicator, a system that will provide that figures to indicate to us if we are moving in the right direction.
All right. Well, thank you all for being here this morning and sharing so much information with us. You definitely allowed for accessibility of what you were doing in your workshops, right? Thank you once again. We're going to go ahead and take a break, and when we come back, let's talk depression. That's coming up with the Ministry of Health in a few. Stay tuned.